What's going on, guys? So one of the most requested topics that I get is related to tires. And you guys know that I'm kind of a tire snob when it comes to RV tires. Now, being a tire snob doesn't necessarily mean that I feel we have to have the most expensive tires or perhaps the most recognizable brand name. But for me, being a tire snob simply means that you have a good quality tire, one with a proven track record for reliability and, not as many failures, and one that most people in the RV industry kind of go to and believe is a reputable brand that is, a good choice if you're going to be swapping tires out or upgrading to a new tire or simply replacing old tires. So let's talk about tires for a little bit. Hang tight, I'll be right back. Okay, so if you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you've probably seen all the different tires that I've tested on various types of RVs and trailers. The tires that we currently run, these are actually a sponsored tire. These are Continental HTL2 Eco Plus tires. These are 245/70 R 17.5, 17.5 being the diameter of the wheel itself, 245 being essentially the section width right there, and 70 being a percentage. So it's 70% the width to the height of the sidewall. So whenever you're looking at this number right here, that's considered the aspect ratio. Whenever you look at a tire in general, there are all sorts of different types of tires. Now, the reason why I'm so close up on these tires right now is because I want to show you the tread. That tread to a lot of people might look like it's a very worn out tire. But if, again, you've followed my channel for a while, you've seen my comparisons that I've done with different types of tires. And, if you've been in the industry, if you've towed a lot of RVs for a long period of time, if you've, if you're used to trucking companies and the types of trailers that they run, you'll realize that this is what's called a rib design. And a rib design tire for a truck or a semi-tractor is typically a very smooth tread pattern in this rib design going down the center. Now, a rib design doesn't always mean it's going to be smooth right there. But the way these are specifically designed is they're designed for trailering applications on highway, not off-road usage, and they're also designed specifically to give you the best possible fuel economy. So when you see that Eco Plus right here, that's an indication that these are really designed for the commercial towing industry where it really matters what type of rolling resistance you have. And what I mean by that is that's the resistance created from the friction of the tire to the surface that you're driving over. For instance, if this was the highway surface we were driving over, there would be a ton of rolling resistance because of all of this aggregate and rock that's down here. If we're driving over pavement, which is very new and fresh, that rolling resistance may actually come down quite a bit. If you drive over concrete, it might come down even more. But a lot of it depends on the road surface itself. When you transition from like concrete or asphalt that's really quiet and smooth feeling in your car to something that's rougher, well, you've actually transitioned to a rougher and you've increased your rolling resistance, which takes away from your fuel economy. So it's a meaningful thing to go to a tire that has a lower rolling resistance if you're super worried about fuel economy. Just keep in mind you may not get the traction you're looking for in an off-road environment. But I would never say that this fifth wheel would ever be designed for an off-road environment. So, these tires are perfectly fine. Now, the question about tire reliability and tire reputability is really big in the RV industry because you guys know that I've moved from, some really interestingly cheap tires like Rainier tires, like Trailer King tires, and I recommend going to something like a Goodyear Endurance or possibly even a Saloon, a Continental. Several other models of tires are available that are considered high quality. Cooper now has a really, really good tire for an RV, and of course a lot of people prefer an LT tire or a light truck tire. Now, light truck tires are becoming more and more popular on travel trailers simply because there's a perception and oftentimes a reality that a light truck or an LT tire from a reputable brand is going to hold up better on an RV. The only thing I would definitely caution you with, I'm not saying not to do it, I'm just saying the only thing I would caution you with is paying very close attention to the payload capacity rating of that LT tire. Because some folks believe, okay, well, if it's a good application to replace on a 5,000 or 6,000 pound GVWR travel trailer, well, then obviously it's a good option to put on my fifth wheel. So they'll go and get an LT tire and throw it on a 16,000 pound fifth wheel, thinking that they're actually making their RV safer. And they're not. You may not have a lot of options in terms of the wheel diameter payload rating of an LT tire for an RV specifically. What I mean by that is a 16-inch wheel on a fifth wheel is pretty common. But to find an LT tire on a 16-inch wheel that can actually support the weight of an RV or a heavy RV might be a little difficult for you. So you want to keep that in mind. Also, there are some differences in terms of how a trailer tire is designed and built and engineered versus a passenger vehicle tire. Now, of course, there are crappy brands of tires out there. They make them for cars, they make them for trucks, and they make them for trailers. The trailer industry seems to be very, very flooded with them, though, or at least the perception that the tires are bad. I believe they've improved over the last 5 or 6 years, but for the most part, when you buy your RV, you're getting a pretty horrible tire. There are some brands of RVs, though, like Jayco and some Forest River products and some Thor products that are going to a Goodyear Endurance as the OEM tire. And I think that's more because Goodyear, as well as the distributor for Goodyear, has essentially, proven to the industry you don't have to pay that much more to get a better quality tire. Now, the thing I also want to caution you with is that the Goodyear Endurance tire, as good of a tire as it is, and the fact that it is manufactured here in the United States, does not mean that it's failure proof. I have heard time and time again, I've seen a lot of pictures, I've been to the forums, that the Goodyear Endurance tire for a lot of people has been a really bad tire for them. It hasn't lasted any longer. It hasn't been a better quality tire, even though there's a perception that because the tire's manufactured here in the States, that it is a better quality tire. And I think for some people, just the fact that they're getting a tire on their RV that was manufactured here in the US is important enough for them that, they're willing to risk a failure only because they know that they're supporting the U.S. economy. So, I don't have any gripes against that, but just understand that I would personally rather have an imported tire that's built better and that will last longer than a domestic tire when it comes to towing a trailer. Supporting the U.S. economy is absolutely important to me. I do it very much so when I can, but my family's safety is more important to me than that. And what I mean by that is if I, have to hunt down a Saloon replacement or a Trans Eagle replacement or, a number of other brands that have a G-rated tire for, a smaller wheel diameter, I'll do that if it means I have to get an imported tire, if it means that I'm not going to be a possible safety hazard going down the road, and if it means I can keep people on the road safe as well as my family safe. Because that's more important to me than being dedicated to a specific brand of tire. And what's interesting also to me is that, a lot of folks who will never buy a tire that is manufactured in a foreign country, regardless of what country, it could be manufactured in the UK or Australia, but they won't buy it simply because they do want to support the U.S. economy, which I get and I understand. But a lot of times the comments that they leave are made over a Samsung or an Apple phone, which are both manufactured in Asia. So, just saying. Anyways, having a quality tire on your RV is super important. It really is. I generally recommend overkill on the tire, keeping in mind that when you go to a stiffer, stronger tire, you are significantly impacting the shock and vibration that tire will transfer to the chassis of the RV. So at that point, it's up to the chassis of the RV to have the suspension components in place, to have the suspension period to either be able to absorb it and mitigate the transfer into the chassis of the RV, or just understanding what's going on and what will happen to the ride of the RV. So one of the reasons why I usually say when I'm doing a walk around in an RV is whether or not it has an upgraded suspension, or, if you need to upgrade the tires within a period of time. I say that because the two kind of go hand in hand. If you go to a stronger tire with a thicker, stronger sidewall casing, you are going to have a tire that transfers more shock into the RV, which makes it more important to have an upgraded equalizer to help mitigate the amount of shock that you're transferring from your new rougher riding tires into your RV. In many cases, you can go to a quality tire that might just be a load rating or two higher than what your current tire has, which will dramatically improve your safety without having to upgrade your shock. So for instance, if I was moving from like a C-rated tire to a D-rated tire, the letter, of course, indicating the actual capacity the tire is designed to hold, or the ply rating, and a lot of times it's like this virtual ply rating. It's the equivalent of a certain number of plies to build the tire. But if I go to a higher load rated tire or a higher ply rating tire on a RV that came with a lower, payload or ply rated tire, then I am improving my chances of, not having a tire failure, so long as I pay attention to all the other variables, such as how much air I'm putting in the tire. Is it aired up properly? Is the tire in good condition? Are my axles aligned? That's a big one a lot of people don't realize. An out of alignment axle, even if it's just slightly out of alignment, is going to not only cause major sway issues, but it's also going to cause vibration, wear and tear, and it's going to really destroy part of your tire. Not just your axle, but also the wheel and the hub. Is it aligned properly? Is it bent? Is it out of sync? If your tire is leaning one way or the other, then you're also going to have uneven wear. You couple that with a slightly, out of sync axle, you could have a lot of tire problems simply because your axle and your hub, when you think it has something to do with the tire. So you always want to keep that in mind. Another one that a lot of people don't realize is if you have frozen brakes, or if you have a brake that is semi-frozen and you're driving down the road and this one's wanting to drag slightly while this one's spinning freely. You could also experience increased wear and tear, and you could actually also increase the chance that you're going to have sway. The reason why sway can occur with tires in your setup here is because if you have tires that aren't properly matched, aren't properly aligned, and aren't set up properly, your trailer may want to do this number when you're pulling it, and your truck is trying to keep that in line. So, when that effect starts getting exacerbated as you tow down the road, especially in various types of weather conditions, it can cause your trailer to want to do this where your truck is trying to pull it back in line, and it can create sway. So it's just something to be aware of, because, people generally think sway is always a product of wind and, the energy of that wind pressing against the side of your RV and things like that, when a lot of times sway is simply caused by components on your RV not being set up properly. And some of those components can bend or get out of whack only because you hit a really hard bump, or, maybe you bumped into something, or maybe you were turning the RV so tight that something bent underneath. You just want to always keep that in mind. Now, at the end of the day, tire care, what you actually inflate them to, how you handle your load, what type of tire, what brand of tire, everything contributes to having an RV with tires that won't fail. When I look at the industry and I guesstimate how many people actually have tire failures over the life of owning their RV, it's probably a relatively small number percentage-wise, but still a relatively high amount of people that have problems. So if I say out of 100 RVers, probably 20% will have some type of a tire failure or tire issue within the first couple of years of owning their RV. And you can seriously reduce that by just paying attention to what's going on down here. Whether or not it is time to upgrade your tires, whether or not it's dry rot that's happening to your tire, whether or not you're overinflating it or underinflating it, the types of roads you're driving over, the types of maneuvering you're doing with it, what you're loading inside of your RV, all of that factors into tires and how tires are going to hold up. Those are what connect you to the ground, and you got to think, if you have an RV that's designed to carry 1,000 pounds worth of cargo capacity, and they put a relatively cheap tire on with a relatively low payload capacity, and you start overloading your RV and you don't fill up your tires properly, and they're 6 years old and they're starting to dry rot and the sun's hitting them, and then you transition from different environments and climates, and all of a sudden you're on a road that's 160 degrees and you're driving over that road at 75 miles an hour for 3 or 4 hours, you're probably kind of putting yourself in a position where a tire is going to blow out, and all of a sudden the tire is going to be named a junk tire because of something maybe the owner could have done a little differently. Tires can fail on their own, and they do all the time. It is your responsibility to make sure that your RV has good tires on it. Even if it came with crappy tires, you should still look at understanding what the benefits are of going to a newer tire, a more reputable tire, and a tire that's respected by the industry. Even if it's not a brand name tire, even if it's not a tire that, you go to your local big box tire store and you see on the shelf there. If it's a tire that RVers suggest because it's been a good performing tire, then those are the tires you should look at, brand aside. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you've enjoyed this video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.